Hello and welcome back to the Eden Road podcast. Tonight's show is going to be a lot of fun after we record back-to-back wins for the first time this season and become the first team to win their first 3 games at the Bridge. Walking us through another famous day at Stamford Bridge is Craig. Craig, how are we, mate? Feeling good after Saturday?
I don't think I could be feeling any better after the grief I've given them in recent episodes. I think it's all just.
It's all just, mate. It's all just. And also, Dan is back. Dan, mate, feeling good?
Yeah, brilliant. Not talking about relegation anymore, so...
Yes, very, very premature, as we Brentford fans are very used to in recent years. Anyway, just before we get going, folks, remember, if you haven't listened to the podcast before, please do share it around with your mates. Give us a subscription on YouTube and our Spotify channels, and also give us a follow on our socials as at the Eden Road on Twitter and at Eden Road Pod on Instagram. Right, Chelsea, let's just get straight into it. Craig, it's another win at Stamford Bridge, another fantastic performance after Burnley. It's just what we do at their place, isn't it?
Oh, mate, training ground, easy game. I think that it's just one of those places where we seem to go and have a lot of success. Oh, we're definitely their bogey team. Definitely their bogey team.
100%. Dan, initial takeaways, what did you think?
I thought it was probably the closest of the 3 games, which is probably saying quite a lot. It's always great to see after the game a lot of bitter Chelsea fans on Twitter. You can search a few phrases in the search bar to find them if you want to find them. I thought we rode our luck a bit to begin with, but second half we got a bit more braver in terms of being able to play out and play through instead of just clearing it long and inviting pressure. But yeah, brilliant.
I think, you just mentioned it. We'll walk through it. First half, I think it was kind of how we expected it to go. I think we mentioned it on the last podcast that, I did at least, that I thought we'd be under the cosh for a lot of the game. We were quite wasteful in possession, as you just mentioned, Dan. Wasn't really sticking. Whenever we got a hold of the ball, we'd kind of just lump it forward and it wouldn't really go to anyone. It had me wondering sort of what Thomas Frank said at half-time, because, Craig, in that second half, I felt like we were a different side.
I kind of feel like it might have been part of our game plan to actually let Chelsea have a lot of the ball anyway. They just seem incredibly toothless. Like, there was no bite to their attack whatsoever. And let's be honest, we could be playing now and they probably still wouldn't have scored against us. They were created chances, but they've got a striker that doesn't want to move. Wingers that don't want to cut in, don't want to be in the box. Gets to half time, Thomas, I think all he has to say is go out there, raise the levels a little bit, keep doing what you're doing, and eventually they're going to tire out the tides are going to turn. Jesus, couldn't get my words out. The tides are going to turn and chances are going to start coming. We cut that bit out.
I will be leaving that in, mate. Don't you worry. I think I don't want to take too much away from the performance, but Chelsea were just terrible. Nicholas Jackson, I really liked him at the start of the season. But my God, that was a terrible performance. I remember 2 or 3 shots he had that went out for a throw in. They were also missing Mudryk, who's been in good form recently, and Enzo Fernandez. But anyway, without trying to take too much away from the performance, Dan, we get that throw in down the right hand side in the second half. I'll hold my hands up and say that I was screaming at Jensen to just launch it into the box because we hadn't quite got to the levels we were at for the rest of the half yet. Were you thinking the same thing? Are you quite surprised when he just kind of tees it off to Mbomo, who obviously does the business, pulls it back for Pinnock, and he's there at the back stick?
I quite like when we look for the short one before going long, because when you go long straight with the throw, it relies on someone to flick it on at the near post, and you've almost got to win 2 balls in order to come out of a goal at the end. So I quite like that we look for a short one. And obviously some teams don't like it because they start shouting and screaming and saying that we're time wasting. But I think, it's fair enough to do that. We're not time wasting to waste time. I think Pinnock was obviously coming forward anyway because he got on the end of it. So I think the plan was, to look for a long one if, there wasn't a short option. But yeah, I definitely think, it's much better to look for a short option first. And then obviously Brian, with his crossing ability, can probably get it a bit further in there and in a better area than Jensen with a throw.
Yeah, I'm definitely glad that he opted to go short after what happened. The second goal, Craig, Match of the Day mentioned it too. Why hasn't Neil shot before Sanchez gets close to him? Because he kind of does the right thing going across him, but he does it a bit too late. But I'm thinking he hasn't scored in 34 games or however long it is. Why hasn't he just put it in the back of the net and given himself that little confidence boost?
I think that's it. It's a severe lack of confidence to not even trust yourself to put the ball in an empty net from 25, 30 yards. It just shows that he needs a pickup. I thought maybe the Burnley performance would give him a bit of a pickup. And he doesn't seem hesitant on the ball when he's playing. But in this scenario, he's running clean through on goal, not even the goalkeeper to beat. And he still somehow loses possession to the goalkeeper behind it because, as much as they rightly pointed out, it's kind of Sanchez that actually pokes the ball through Neil's legs to Ibrahim. So he don't really get the assist. I'm sure it goes down as his assist anyway. But, I mean, that's the lack of confidence, man. He needs a goal soon.
I know. I tweeted out on that.
I tweeted saying I'm sure he's doing everything in his power not to score.
Yeah, I tweeted out that he's definitely having flashbacks to the Cardiff goal when he played for us in the Championship, which was one of the biggest howlers I've ever seen. But I was literally, the whole time he was running through on goal, I was thinking, oh my God, he's going to miss. Yeah. So I'm so glad that he put it away. By the way, I said on the last podcast that I transferred him into my fantasy. Got booked before he'd even bloody come on the pitch, which was just typical. But Dan is kind of getting into Sharda territory now in terms of, is it just a case of he needs one? And once he gets one, I think he'll kick on.
Yeah, I mean, how fast was Sanchez, by the way, compared to Morpay? Like, how did he catch him? But yeah, I think he needs one that he doesn't have to think about. Like when he was through last week as well, it probably felt like, I mean, especially at the weekend, it probably felt like 5 minutes running from the halfway line. I don't really think he looked up. Like he was just trying to get close enough, I suppose, to be sure that he wouldn't miss. But I think if he just has like one that just comes to him, like the goal that was ruled out actually against Burnley, if he has just one that hits him on the head or, comes to him, then, I think that's what he needs at the moment to give him the confidence. Whereas he had too much time to think about that.
Yeah, exactly. We're going to hope that he kicks on against West Ham and hopefully gets a goal. We'll talk about West Ham a bit later, but I think there's a few kind of standout performances that need mentioning, especially in defence, because we were, if we're being honest, defending for most of the game. But not to say that Chelsea had a lot of chances, but just to say that we were defending most of the game. First of all, I tweeted out Nathan Collins. Craig, I think that was by far and away his best game in a Brentford shirt. He was class. He was a Rolls Royce at the back. He was snuffing out attacks. He was composed on the ball. He was spraying them out in the second half as well. How good was he on Saturday?
Unbelievable. A lot of people were questioning the price that we paid for him, the 20 million that we paid for a centre-back from Wolves. I'm going to include the United game because that was 2 minutes of pure chaos at the end. But the last 3 games, possibly even further, Nathan Collins has just been a rock at the back. 2 clean sheets in a row, 2 moments of chaos against Man United. But he's just been absolutely solid and completely worth the price that we paid for him. It's actually looking like a bargain now.
I know. I think it's becoming a bit of a theme with Brentford this season. Everyone was kind of talking about relegation, kind of writing off Collins, all of these players. We have kept the faith on this podcast. Can I just say, with the players as well, when they were saying, the performances have been there, results will come. It's the same thing with the players. But, the jury was out for Nathan Collins at one point after that run of games where people weren't fancying him. But especially in the last 3 games, you can see he's really turned it on. As well, Ethan Pinnock. Dan, is he one of the best centre-backs in the league? I was watching Thomas Frank give his BT Sport interview after the game, and Thomas Frank said defensively he is the best in the league, which is obviously a big claim. Probably don't agree with that, but he's got to back his player at the end of the day. But is Ethan Pinnock one of the best centre-backs in the league?
Yeah, I don't think he's necessarily fashionable, so I don't think he would ever go to a big club and necessarily succeed there, but in terms of just actual defending, winning the ball in the air, being commanding, I think he's near the top of, various statistics for Jules 1 and things like that. And, he's got a last ditch tackle in him. So I like him in the middle of a 3 next to Adja and Collins, because I think Adja and Collins are probably slightly better ball players. But when we play that back 5, I think, they all complement each other really well and it's solid. And I definitely think that we should carry on playing a back 5 against the top teams just because of how it's worked so far. I don't see why we need to change that when it is working against the big teams. So
yeah, well, there's a talking point that we're going to get to in the hot topic with someone on talkSPORT who isn't too happy with the way we're playing against the big 6. But I think, Craig, we've also got to show some love to Chris Ayer, who's really starting to impress in a Brentford shirt. After there's kind of been question marks about him, and maybe justified considering how little he's played. He's been very unlucky with injuries, but recently, especially, not only is he kind of a leader on the pitch, but he is one of our best players in terms of kind of getting us out of tight situations. There were a lot of times in that game where he kind of took the ball on the flank and beat Raheem Sterling, or closed down Raheem Sterling, took the ball off him. But he was class.
Oh yeah. Do you know what? I think it was the podcast after the Arsenal game, which might have been my debut episode, shall we say, and we talked about a few players, and Aya was one that I mentioned, and I remember saying people have written him off. He had a few injuries, but he was brilliant the first season when he was in the Prem. He was fantastic. He then obviously got plagued with injuries over the next year and has come back this year, and he's solid. I think that he's brilliant. I think he's fantastic. The three, as you said, complement themselves really well. And just to point, Ethan Pinnock as a left-footed centre-back is completely held our defence together. I feel like we miss him when he's out more than we miss, say, Ben Mee or or Nathan Collins. That left-footed centre-back completely holds that defence together. And yeah, Ethan Pinnock, so overlooked.
Kind of raises an important, maybe not important, but just like a interesting point about when Ben Mee gets back into the team, Dan, or when he's fit again. Does he have as big a role this season as he had last season?
I would say no. I think Collins and Adja particularly are probably the future in terms of their ages and their profiles. You know, they could be our centre back pairing in 5 to 10 years time quite easily. Obviously Ben Mee's getting a bit older now. He's doing quite a bit of punditry, so maybe he's looking forward a bit. I think he's a good person to have in the dressing room. I can't imagine he's really making a fuss about not starting at the moment. And obviously I know he's just come back from injury. I think he's also a very solid player to have there if Pinnock, for example, was to get injured, because obviously Ben Mee's left-footed as well. So yeah, I can see him playing maybe a similar role to Zanka, but maybe one ahead of Zanka in the pecking order.
Yeah, I think we've got the strength and depth, especially in that centre back position. I think we need to talk as well about Thomas Frank's substitution, particularly. I don't want to say his name right, but I really don't want to butcher it. Yarmoliuk. All right, Larmiliuk. One of those. Sorry if you're listening, mate. He had a chance to get his first Brentford goal towards the end, which would have been just a dream start to his kind of tenure in this Brentford side in terms of the first team. We have a real player on our hands, I think, Craig, because it's two impressive cameos. First against Burnley, now against Chelsea. Obviously, he's made a few appearances in the cup, but he looks really good for such a young player.
Oh yeah, and I think we've got to give Robert Sanchez a bit of credit for that save towards the end of the game as well. He shut him down very well, and yeah, he was unfortunate not to get on the score sheet on Saturday. But yeah, I see so many shades of different players in him. He's very Norgard-esque in the way he controls the ball. He's very Janelt-esque in the way that he can move the ball. I think that we've got a player that is someone that once Norgard wants to start maybe taking a back seat from his captaincy and things like that someone that can step in, someone that can fill that space. But he's got so much ahead of him, and he's got an incredible amount of talent already.
Yeah, it's definitely one to look at for the future, because he does look very comfortable on the ball, especially for someone so young who hasn't made too many first team appearances. Final one on Chelsea, boys. What are we thinking about that? I mean, it's starting to get a bit too familiar on the podcast talking about us going to Stamford Bridge and getting 3 points, but I mean, it is just kind of pinch yourself material. But it's just so strange. You don't look at this fixture on the calendar and think, yes, a certain 3 points going into the game. I knew it was going to be quite a different one to where when we've played them before, Dan. But it's just, I mean, this turnaround recently started with Burnley. We didn't have too many hopes for Chelsea. Would have definitely taken a point there, but it just seems like one of those grounds where we just go to and blow them away.
Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, this time next year we'll be saying, surely we can't win 4 times in a row. But you never know. Like, yeah, we're brilliant. And I think it shows a lot of trust that Thomas has in the players, to bring Yarmoliuk on with half an hour left or whatever at Stamford Bridge, 1-0 up. It shows that, he trusts him. Godos could have probably done a job there, but he didn't want to do that. So, yeah, brilliant. And, players are stepping up in the absence of the ones that are injured.
Perfect. Right. Well, we'll go on to hot topic then. I thought this week we'd talk about the talkSPORT video that I mentioned earlier that's been doing the rounds on Twitter about a certain Andy Jacobs. For anyone that's not seen the video, Jacobs, whose second team is supposedly Brentford and who has a season ticket at Brentford, said he hates the way we play against big teams and wants us to lose against West Ham. Craig, I'll go to you first on this one. Just a really strange video when I saw it. I was just surprised. I was kind of surprised that it's just been, not surprised, but it's just been getting so much attention online just because of how kind of ludicrous it is. It's just a weird thing to say. I really don't understand it at all. What did you make of it?
It's just bullshit. Sorry, it's just absolute nonsense. It's just absolute nonsense. If it, I don't even know who his other team supposedly is.
Apparently it's Chelsea.
Yeah, I think it's Chelsea.
I think it's Chelsea. Yeah.
I think maybe it's a little bit of bitterness as well. He maybe went into that game hoping that Chelsea would nick something out of it, given that we are, in air quotes, second team. If you don't like it, don't go back. You won't be missed, mate. You won't be missed.
I know. Danny, you echoed that. I was kind of just watching it thinking, who cares if we play like that against the Big Six? We've got one of the best records against the Big Six out of teams outside the top six. We play like that and it works. So why the hell would we change it if we're getting 3 points every time we play them?
Yeah, first of all, what does he expect? Because teams like Chelsea, so the Big Six, are obviously technically better than us and probably always will be. So we're not going to go to those places. We're not going to go to the Etihad and try and play like Man City against Man City because they'll tear us apart. So, yeah, it's crazy. Like, we're obviously going to set up in a way which means that we're going to probably play a low block. We're going to accept that we don't have all the ball. We're going to, look for those balls into the channel. Obviously, when Ivan's not playing, so we'll have to go long differently. And we'll just be solid and hard to beat. And if teams like Chelsea aren't good enough to break us down, then that's their problem. Maybe they need to change how they play against us because, they can see our record against other teams. They know exactly what we're going to do. Chelsea knew what we were going to do, but, they couldn't find a way to beat it. And they just, they created chances, but not necessarily clear-cut chances, maybe one or two, but, it wasn't really enough. I think Flecken made 2 saves, 2 shots on target, I think. So, what they're doing isn't enough. So I think, maybe they should change how they play. It'll be more interesting.
I'm definitely clipping that up. Thanks, Dan. But yeah, no,
also, before we move on, you just mentioned it. Can we please give Flecken some more credit for another clean sheet, back to back? Have that, you lot. Have it.
Goalkeepers union, mate. The goalkeepers union sticking up for each other. We love to see it. But going back to the comments on talkSPORT, the stupid comments on talkSPORT. I've spoken about it with other people. It points to one of Brentford's biggest strengths, the fact that Thomas Frank is so adaptable in the way that he sets up his team, especially the fact that we can go to these teams who, like you mentioned, Dan, have more money than us, better players than us, and 9 times out of 10 will beat us. But that 1 time out of 10 where Thomas Frank actually decides to put it out of the bag and says, you know what, we're going to soak up all this pressure, we're going to defend well, we're going to hit him on the counter, it works. So why the hell would you change it? talkSPORT, it's just a load of bollocks. I hope the geezer gets sacked. I hope he has his season ticket revoked because we don't want him at the G-Tech. And I think I can speak on behalf of all Brentford fans when I say that. We'll move on to West Ham. Let's go on to West Ham. We come up against the West Ham side who started the season in good form, it has to be said. Obviously, they've had a whirlwind couple of years, being in Europe for the last 3 seasons, winning the Conference League last year, but have had a bit of a blip recently. They're now winless in 4 in all competitions. Dan, I spoke to a West Ham podcast earlier in the week, which you'll be able to find tomorrow. I kind of said to him, I think this is the most confident I've ever been going into a game this season. What do you think about that? Because especially, with our recent turnaround in form, with West Ham's recent dip, how are you feeling heading into that game?
Yeah, I was watching their game against Everton, and on Sky Sports, Paquetá got a yellow card, and then it came up, missed his game against Brentford. Then Alvarez got a yellow card. He's also missing the game against Brentford, and I think that gives them a problem in the centre of midfield, particularly. I feel like they're quite important players to West Ham. So yeah, I definitely think I'm definitely confident. I think Thomas Frank's style seems to work quite well against David Moyes as well. I think he's relatively conservative, David Moyes, and although they've got some attackers who are a bit worrying. I think Bowen and Kudus, I think, are good players, and they're on good form, and they pose a threat. But I think we will be able to manage the game quite well, and I think we'll be able to take chances. And I don't see why we can't be looking at 3 points.
Yeah, I think definitely. I think it would be Hickey. Well, actually, Craig, I'll ask you first. Do you see us going back to a back four on Saturday? Because I know West Ham set up in a flat back four. I would personally like to see us going in front, go for back four. Sorry, so we can have that front three that we had against Burnley. How do you see it? How do you see it going?
I see it going back. We had this conversation prior to the Chelsea game. We was giving Neil a lot of credit and a lot of praise after the Burnley game, just to then go, well, he ain't going to start against Chelsea anyway. I think he's coming back in. I think he comes back in. And, he might come onto the pitch without a yellow card this time around because he'll probably be starting, fingers crossed.
Unless he winds someone up in the warm-up.
yeah, just goes and clumps someone. I think we go back to the back four. Hickey will be on the left side. Mads or I think, will be on the right. It's difficult to call that side now with the way that they've both been playing. I hate to say it, I didn't think that was one of Mads' best games on Saturday. No. I thought Roslev was a bit poor. He had a lot of cover from Ayer on that right-hand side as well. So, personally, I'd like to see a back four of Hickey, Pinnock, Collins and Ayer on the right-hand side. But it also wouldn't surprise me if Roslev does start. But, again, preference, whatnot.
Yeah, I think I think it will be Aaron Hickey coming up against Bowen, who is going to have a big job on his hands because Jared Bowen has been on fire yet again this season, as the famous West Ham song goes. But I think I spoke about it with the West Ham podcast that I spoke to in the week about the kind of differences. And we have a great chat about Said Benrahma, who I know a lot of Brentford fans are going to want to listen to this preview because he had some very choice words for Said Benrahma that I know a lot of Brentford fans will not be happy about. But he said one of the biggest differences between someone like Said Benrahma and Jared Bowen is that he's so direct. Whenever he gets the ball, he's looking to beat his man or get a cross in or have a shot. And this season, Dan, he's been one of the standout performers in the league, I'd say, and he has been for the last couple of seasons. So Aaron Hickey's going to have a big job on his hands on Saturday.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think he's their top scorer by quite some way. I think. And he's their main man now. I think he's signed a contract for 7 years or something. So yeah, he's clearly their main man, and he's a threat, and he's grown. I hope Lewis Potter's looking at him and thinking, he also came from Hull. He was a main man at Hull before. And I think I've heard Hull fans say before that Lewis Potter was even better than Bowen at Hull. So that's what I'm hoping for from him. But yeah, Bowen, he's done brilliantly. Yeah,
I think whoever starts up top for them on Saturday, I'm presuming it'll be Mikel Antonio, but he is awful. So we don't need to worry about him. But I feel like one of the only players we do need to worry about, with Paqueta being out and Alvarez being out, is Jared Bowen. Craig, let's just throw forward a little bit to the next couple of games. Have the last, first we'll go back. Have the last two results felt like a bit of a turnaround in our season? We've had good performances throughout, but the two results have started to come. So I'll go to you first, Craig. Turn around the season, then Dan, I'll come to you about the run of fixtures we've got coming up, because it is looking like the Chelsea 3 points could be a big one, considering we've got Liverpool and Arsenal to come too. But yeah, turnaround, Craig. Do you reckon this is kind of the start of our season, would you say?
Do you know what? Like you said, the performances have been there. So I wouldn't say this is the start of our season. I would say this is the start of the correct results. The performances that we've had, bar Everton, which was dreadful, have been there. The Arsenal Cup game that we had, that was a fantastic performance. Unfortunately, we didn't get anything from that game. Maybe a bit unjust, but that's the way of the world. But then when we go into the Burnley and the Chelsea game, and the performances and the attitudes are right, the chances that we're creating are good chances. The chances that can and are be putting away. I say that like we didn't score two absolute worldies against Burnley anyway, but we're creating the chances, which is the main thing. We're in the right places. I'd say confidence-wise, we are on a peak for this season so far. And if we beat West Ham, that trajectory is going to keep going up, rightly so as well. But got to keep ourselves grounded at the same time, because it would be so Brentford to lose to West Ham knowing half of their midfield is suspended anyway. So confidence-wise, yes, it's a bit of a turnaround considering the low that we were after the Everton game. But performances have been there, and if we perform the way that we know we can against West Ham, then I think the confidence will be high going into what Dan's going to touch on, the games that are coming up.
Yeah, Dan, the games that are coming up, we've got West Ham obviously on Saturday, then we've got Liverpool, and then after the international break, we've got Arsenal. So how important could Saturday be considering those two that we have to face back to back afterwards?
I think we can say every game's important. I don't think we really have anything to fear particularly. I think, there's 4 quite poor teams in the Premier League this year, and they're already starting to be left behind a little bit. So I don't think we should go into any of those games with anything to fear. We've shown time and time again, if anyone has belief that they can beat some of the biggest teams in the league, it's probably us. We know what we're doing. The game plan for each of those games will be different. Of course, it's probably one that we're more expecting to get something out of against West Ham. But as a fan, to be honest, I probably prefer the Arsenals and the Liverpools where we're going, and we, don't have, massive expectations, but we're also, quite hopeful that we can turn up and perform, and we've got nothing to lose, and we've got, nothing too serious to worry about. I think, we can be quite confident and we're in a good place. So, yeah, it's important, but I would say every game, you could say is important in some way.
Craig, just before we wrap up, I'm looking ahead to that Arsenal fixture and I'm thinking that is one that I'd really, really like to get a result in, considering we haven't beat them since we played them in the first game in the Premier League. Which one are you, out of the 3, West Ham, Liverpool and Arsenal, which one are you hoping for 3 points out of? Well, apart from all of them, obviously, because we want to win every game.
Oh, yeah, I want to win all of them. Honestly, I would love to go to Anfield and come away with 3 points. As a Brentford fans, there's the meme on Twitter whenever you say, or wherever we've come from, and things like that. But
the journey merchants, I believe it's
exactly,
called.
Yeah. I'd love to beat Arsenal. Obviously, everyone would. But to go to Anfield and come away with 3 points, I couldn't think of anything better. Do you know what? Out of all of the games that's coming up, it's the Luton game that I'm most worried about.
Yeah, no, Luton's going to be fun. I'm looking forward to Luton away. By the way, that's going to be class. Anyway, I think it's going to be good. I think that'll be a good point to wrap up the podcast, chaps. The Ealing Road podcast will be back next week to discuss the game against West Ham and also look ahead to Liverpool the following weekend. Also, I mentioned it in the podcast earlier, but keep your eyes peeled for a conversation with Will Pugh from the We Are West Ham podcast, who gives us the lowdown on the Hammers before Saturday. And like I said, he's got some very, very choice words on Said Benrahma that I'm sure a lot of Brentford fans will want to tune in for, considering I mentioned it on the podcast, I think he's the best player I've seen play for Brentford. I don't know if that's a contentious claim, but I would say he's probably the best player I've seen in my lifetime. But yeah, we get into it and there's a bit of debate and it gets a little bit heated. So just wait for that. Keep your eyes peeled for that one. And just before we go, guys, remember, if you haven't listened to the podcast before, please do share it around with your mates. Subscribe to our YouTube and Spotify channels and also follow us on our socials. That's at The Ealing Road on Twitter and at Ealing Road Pod on Instagram. Dan, Craig, it's been a pleasure and I'll see you next week.